this, which is a D flat minor arpeggiated figure right there. So what I did was I kind of shocked the ear by playing this really mindless sounding thing, and I landed up on my feet following the chord with the D flat minor arpeggio. Okay, and on the next chord, which is E and B, I did something like this. Now over the E, I followed it like it was a D flat minor. And what I did was I followed it that way because E and D flat minor are relative to each other, so you can generally use the scales of each in the other. So what I did was I pretended that I was playing over a D flat minor chord, and I relied on the flat fifth in the blues scale of that quite a bit, like this, the flat fifth being G. So I started on the E chord. When the E chord came in the progression, I started on the G note, and I did this. Okay, so that's how I followed the E chord. I followed it sort of like it was a D flat minor chord. Okay, and then when it came time for the B chord after it, I only used two notes, which is just A and the note of E flat bent to from D. So over the B chord, all I did was go. Now what you have there is A and E flat, which are the two main notes in a B7 chord, like this. There's your E flat, there's your A. So I followed the B chord like it was a B7 chord. And the next line, I did like this. I totally changed the entire vibe of the whole thing. I said, I'm not going to play D flat minor oriented things anymore. I'm going to play this line, a D flat major sounding thing. Just totally changed the entire, the entire vibe of the whole thing by going like this. Kind of a Chinese sounding thing. And if you look at it closely, it's this figure. The only thing that makes it major is this note right there, F natural. Because if it were minor, it would have E in it. It would sound like this. It would have that sound to it. But I use the major note so I can change the sound of the whole solo. Okay, so that's how I followed that D flat chord. And then on the A chord that comes up next, all I did was play the note A and slide up an octave on the same note. I mean, there's nothing safer than that. Just playing the note, playing the octave of the note. Okay, that's a pretty safe way to follow that chord. And the next chord, which was B, I followed with an odd number pattern, a 7 pattern, like the odd numbers I was talking about before. There's 7 notes in that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's also a B7 kind of oriented run, and I followed it adding 2 notes that are not in the B7 arpeggio, which is this note, D flat, E. So it's a B7 arpeggio, adding 2 extra notes to it. Okay, so it looks like this. Okay, now the last measure of the progression is this. Okay, now this is something you also want to think about. It's like the end of the solo is coming up. You want to build it up. So you want to do something different from the rest. Not that the rest hasn't been all different from itself, but the end of this solo is got to be really different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a harmony for the first time in this solo here. And the lick that I'm going to use for this last measure is similar to an exercise that we did earlier in the video. It looks like this. That one. I used that, but this time I used it in the key of D flat minor, because the chord that we're playing over is D flat minor, so I used this. And then I used another kind of mindless sounding lick to really catch your ear for the very end of the solo, which is just this. So that's how I followed the just completely random notes. They don't necessarily follow those chords. I just use something that's going to really, stand out. So I took a chance of playing completely out of key, and I liked the way it sounded, so I left the solo the way it was. Now, to harmonize that, I took the obvious harmony for an arpeggio, and the arpeggio being minor, D flat minor, I took the major relative chord, which would be E major, and I arpeggiated it the same way, using the same variations on that. So it looks like this. Here's D flat minor, and here's E major. That's the same arpeggio variations as I used in the D flat minor one, but moved up into the E major key. So it looks like this. And for the mindless part, I just harmonized it from where I was, the same fingering, same phrasing, everything. So that winds up being 3 frets higher than where the original line was, so you get kind of a minor third feel over that whole thing. And that's a pretty safe harmony, and not too outside, but the note choice is so weird that it comes out sounding pretty weird, and it builds up to the end of the solo nicely. So that's the thought process. That's what you got to think about all the time when you're improvising. You can't just play exercises, and you can't just just solo in one key and think that you're doing something different. You got to really think about every chord and make the best out of every chord, because it gives you a chance to show something different. It gives you a really chance to play. So always follow as much as you can and really think it out, because if you take a little time, you can get something really nice. So that's generally what I want to say. Try to sound different. Try to really think. I think the main thing that you want to do is think, because if you don't think and just let your fingers repeat exercises or repeat licks that you've learned, that's only half of what you got to do. It's a lot more than just dexterity. Being fast or being able to play clean is just, it's just part of it. I think more important than both of those things is to be able to play creatively and to be able to, say something with your guitar. So what you have to do is really think all the time, and think like every note counts, because it does. So that's it for now, and thanks for looking at this video. I hope that you learn a lot from it.